I still remember the way the fog curled around my ankles that night, like a living thing, hesitant yet hungry. Foggy Alley had always been a wound in the city's skin, but on that evening it felt as though the wound had begun to breathe. My name? Better left unsaid. Names have weight, and mine has already dragged too many souls into the dark with me. I had come here chasing a whisper, yes, a whisper, something thin and sharp that slid through my thoughts hours earlier, slicing across memories I had spent years burying beneath cheap whiskey and sleepless nights. It spoke my secrets in a voice that was almost my own, and it ended with a warning. He's walking behind you again. Now, Foggy Alley had only one street lamp still alive, and even that one flickered like a dying pulse. I stepped beneath it, letting the dim light smear over the wet cobblestones. The smell of rust and cold grease seeped from the metal pipes running overhead, mixing with the sour breath of the river not far away. Then I heard it, the soft cadence of footsteps not matching mine. Slow, unhurried, as if savoring each moment of the pursuit. I turned. Nothing but fog. But something moved in it. Something tall enough to stretch the mist in long, wavering tendrils. A silhouette formed for the briefest heartbeat. Narrow shoulders, a slouched neck, and a face that seemed to shimmer as though it wore many expressions at once. A shiver crawled down my spine. I knew that shape. I had dreamed it, or perhaps remembered it. The boundaries were never clear for me.
"Show yourself," I muttered, though my voice betrayed a faint tremor, just enough to prove I was still human. The silhouette didn't step forward. Instead, it tilted its head with slow, unnatural grace. And then it smiled. I didn't see its mouth, yet I felt the smile in the air, stretching thin like a crack across glass. A gust of wind tore through the alley, rattling old fire escape ladders and slamming a distant metal door so hard I felt the vibration in my ribs. The silhouette vanished, but the whisper returned, this time from right beside my ear. "You shouldn't have come back." I spun around, heart pounding, yet there was no one there. Only the lamp above me went out, plunging the alley into a choking black. And I felt with awful certainty that the shadow had not disappeared at all. It had gotten closer. Darkness settled over me like a heavy coat I hadn't agreed to wear. For a few seconds, I stood there listening to the alley breathe, slow, damp exhales from unseen lungs. My fingers twitched toward the revolver under my coat, but instinct held me back. Bullets don't help against something that knows your memories better than you do. A distant metallic scrape echoed from behind, and I swear, just for a moment, I felt a faint warmth brush along the back of my neck, like someone leaning close enough to speak into my skin. I forced myself to walk, the kind of walk you take when running is useless. The fog thickened as I moved deeper into the alley, turning the world into a tunnel of shifting gray. That's when I noticed the door.
A rusted metal door on the right wall. I had walked this alley countless times on old cases, and there had never been a door there, not even a bricked-over outline. Yet tonight it stood open a few inches, as though waiting for me. Warm light seeped through the crack, unnatural in this part of town. Fog swirled around the threshold, reluctant to enter. My heartbeat slowed, heavy and deliberate, like a hand pressing down on it. Then something pushed the door wider from the inside. A long creak spilled out. too drawn out, as if the hinges weren't moving but rather complaining. Against every sane impulse, I leaned in. Inside was a small corridor, lit by a flickering bulb. The walls were peeling with wallpaper patterned with faded roses, and on the floor, just a few feet away, lay a photograph, its edges damp from the alley's mist. I recognized it before I even picked it up. A picture of me, younger, cleaner, before the nightmares, before the case that shattered everything. But someone had carved something into my face with a thin, sharp tool, etched so deeply the paper was nearly torn. A second mouth curling open across my cheek, a grotesque smile. A cold whisper drifted from further down the corridor, soft as breath against the ear. "Come see what you've forgotten." The bulb above me flickered once, twice, and then exploded, showering faint sparks into the dark. And as the last glimmer faded, I heard footsteps approaching from inside the corridor, slow, deliberate, dragging something heavy along the floor.
Something that knew my name without ever needing to speak it. The darkness inside that corridor felt thicker than anything outside, like stepping into another man's nightmare and realizing it fits you a little too well. I held the ruined photograph in my left hand, its carved smile cutting into my palm, a reminder or a warning. The dragging sound grew louder. Something metallic scraped rhythmically against the floor. Shk, 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 as though whatever walked toward me had all the time in the world. My breath came out in faint clouds, though the air felt warm and close. I took one cautious step forward. The corridor elongated with each movement, stretching like an optical trick performed by a cruel magician. The wallpaper roses grew more wilted, more brown, until they resembled eye sockets staring from the walls. Then the voices began. Not one, but many, disjointed murmurs leaking through the plaster. Some whispered my first name, some pleaded, others laughed, a dry, crackling sound, like paper burning slowly. But one voice, one I knew too damn well, rose above the rest. Her. Soft, broken, the same voice I had heard the night she died, calling my name as the light left her eyes. My knees almost buckled. "No, no, not you, not here!" Her voice came again, closer now, as if she were only a breath away. "You left me." My fingers trembled. "I didn't. You know I didn't." Another whisper, this one colder. "He knows the truth. He's bringing it to you." The dragging sound stopped. Silence swallowed the corridor whole. Then, out of the dark, a pale hand slid into view on the floor. Long fingers, nails cracked, skin stretched too thin across the bones. The hand groped forward, pulling the weight of something enormous behind it. I froze, unable to tear my gaze away. A second hand followed, then a shoulder. The shape crawling toward me was wrong in the way broken mirrors reflect pieces of you that don't belong to any whole. And when its face emerged into the faint residual glow from the alley behind me, I saw my own features, but twisted, mouth wide, not carved, not drawn, naturally, horrifically wide, splitting into a grin impossible for any real skull. Eyes black, pupilless, yet unmistakably filled with recognition. It whispered with my exact voice, "I remember what you refuse to." The creature lunged suddenly, dragging its two long limbs with a sickening snap of joints. I stumbled backward, slamming against the doorframe as its fingers brushed the toe of my boot. The corridor lights, what few sparks remained, flared to life for an instant, and I saw that behind the creature, dozens more shapes were stirring, crawling, rising, each one wearing a different version of my forgotten past. I did the only thing my instincts allowed. I ran. Out of the door, into the fog, into the freezing night that for all its horrors still felt safer than what lay inside.
But as the metal door slammed shut behind me with a deafening clang, I realized something awful. The photograph I'd been holding was gone, and in its place, gripped tight in my fist, was a fresh picture, still warm, a picture of me standing in that corridor, taken from behind. The night air hit me like a splash of cold river water, but it did nothing to steady the tremor that had settled in my bones. I clutched the new photograph as though it might bite. The instant my eyes fell on it, the city around me seemed to lean in, listening. In the picture, I stood at the threshold of that impossible corridor, my silhouette sharp against the dim light behind me. But the worst part wasn't my stance, or even the thing crawling toward me in the background. No, it was the figure standing directly behind me in the photo. A tall shadow, upright and composed, so unlike the warped creatures inside. Shoulders narrow, hands tucked neatly into long sleeves, head tilted at an angle that suggested amusement or disappointment. Its face was blurred, a swirl of dark strokes like someone had spirited it away at the last moment, but I knew that posture. I had felt it watching me for years, as a boy, as a detective, as a man haunted by truths he dared not touch. A gust of wind tore the photograph from my hand, but before it drifted into the fog, I glimpsed something I hadn't noticed. Tiny words scribbled in the lower corner.
Follow him. The moment the photo vanished, the alley behind me echoed with a sound I hadn't heard in years. My own footsteps. Not my current ones. Not the ones I made as a grown man. These were quicker, lighter. The hurried steps of a child running from something he couldn't understand. The sound rushed past me, invisible feet slapping the cobblestones, disappearing into the thick gray ahead. And then I saw it. A small shape, darting through the fog, child-sized, flickering, like a memory made flesh. It paused at the far end of the alley, turning toward me, just long enough for me to recognize the outline. It was me. Me, at 8 years old. The age of the first blackout. The age of the first incident, the one my parents refused to speak of. The one the doctors claimed was just trauma, nothing more. My younger self raised a hand. Not a wave, but a beckoning. A summons. Then he ran. I forced my legs into motion, each step pushing through fog that felt thicker than it should. The alley twisted in ways the real city never had, turns that weren't there before, corners that bent in sharp angles like the ribs of a dying animal. Shadows lengthened around me, some stretching across the walls, others gliding along the ground. They moved with purpose, converging ahead as though creating a path someone wanted me to follow. At the end of the shifting corridor of fog, the child me stopped in front of a building I knew too well, though it shouldn't have been here, miles from its real location. A boarded-up townhouse. The one where I grew up. The one where she died. My breath came sharp, The boy looked at me. For the first time I saw his eyes, my eyes, wide, shimmering, terrified. He lifted his small hand and pointed to the door. Then he whispered, voice thin and shaken, "He's in there, and he knows you're coming." Before I could speak, before I could reach for him, the boy dissolved, like breath fading on a cold mirror, leaving only silence. And the townhouse door creaked open on its own, inviting, taunting, expecting me. The door of my childhood home opened with a long exhale, slow, tired, as though the house itself remembered me and wasn't pleased about it. A stale current of air drifted out, brushing my cheeks with the scent of old wood, dust, and something faintly metallic, something almost like dried blood. I stepped across the threshold. The moment my foot touched the floorboards, the house shuddered. Not violently, more like a body trying to awake from a nightmare it's been trapped in too long. Inside, everything was exactly as I remembered. Too exactly. The crooked hallway mirror still hung at the wrong angle, reflecting a warped version of the world. The wallpaper, once pale blue, now seemed the color of a dying bruise. And from somewhere deeper inside, the faint tick of a clock echoed, even though the house hadn't had a working clock since that night. I called into the dim interior, my voice quieter than I intended. "Who's here?" The house answered with a whisper of footsteps, 2 floors above me, light, frantic, a child's.
Then a woman's voice abruptly cut through the air, a scream, her scream, raw, desperate, torn straight from the past. I flinched, my stomach twisting as though a ghost had reached into me with cold fingers. That scream had marked the end of everything I knew, the end of innocence, the beginning of the shadow that refused to leave my side. My pulse hammered as I forced myself deeper inside, each step creaking as though the house was protesting my return. Then I saw him, a tall silhouette at the end of the hallway, the same shadow from the photograph, standing perfectly still just beyond the reach of the flickering ceiling light, hands folded, head tilted, watching me without eyes. I opened my mouth to speak, but he raised one finger to his blurred face, a gesture of silence. Suddenly, the lights went out, pitch black, swallowed me whole, and then the sound began. A wet dragging, not from ahead, not from behind, from beneath the floorboards. It grew louder, scraping across the wood under my feet, circling me like an animal choosing where to bite first. Something thudded softly against the underside of the boards right below where I stood. Once, twice. Then a whisper rose from the cracks between the planks, thin, trembling, familiar. "Help me, please!" My throat closed. It was her voice, but twisted now, fragile, as if she were drowning in earth. I crouched down, fingers brushing the floorboards. "I'm here," I whispered. "Tell me where." The floor split. Wood cracked open like ribs pried apart. A hand shot up through the gap, not hers, not human. Long fingers, skin stretched tight, clawed with frantic desperation. They grabbed me by the wrist with impossible strength, and as the grip tightened, the shadow at the end of the hall leaned forward, stepping closer. For the first time I saw its face clearly. It was mine, but older, harsher, more hollowed out by guilt than I could imagine surviving. It spoke in a voice that sounded like the end of a confession. "You can't save her. You never could. But you can remember." The hand below yanked hard, pulling me toward the widening crack.
The house groaned, as though it wanted to swallow me whole. The boards gave way beneath me, snapping apart like a mouth unhinging. I tumbled through splinters and dust, landing hard on something cold. Concrete, maybe, though it pulsed with warmth like living flesh. The hand that had dragged me down vanished, retreating into the dark beneath the floor with a wet slither. I scrambled back, breath ragged, but there was nowhere to go. The hole above me had already sealed itself shut, as though the house had never been broken at all. I was trapped in the basement, a basement that should not have existed. My childhood home never had one. The darkness around me thickened until it seemed to press against my skin. My eyes adjusted slowly, revealing faint shapes, shifting, swaying, as though the shadows themselves were breathing. A soft hum vibrated through the air, a low tone that made my teeth ache. When I lifted my hand, dust drifted from my fingers. Only it wasn't dust. It was ash, still warm. Something was burning nearby. I followed the faint glow that flickered from the far wall, my footsteps echoing too loud, as if the basement were larger on the inside than any house could allow. Then I saw it. A small room, sectioned off by a flimsy curtain of stained white fabric. Firelight pulsed behind it, rhythmic and sickly, as though the flame was alive. I pushed the curtain aside. The room was empty, except for the old projector, sitting on a table, its reel spinning on its own. Flames burned quietly in a metal pan beside it, filling the space with the scent of scorched photographs. On the peeling wall ahead, the projector cast its image, a grainy film, flickering, uneven, saturated with static. At first, all I saw were shapes, shadows walking back and forth across the frame. Then, the picture sharpened. It was the living room of this house, the night she died. My breath froze in my lungs. There I was on the screen, my younger self, standing in the corner, staring at something out of frame with a vacant expression. And there she was, my mother, face pale, lips trembling, holding a phone in one hand as tears streaked down her cheeks. But then something else entered the frame, a shape, tall, slender, head tilted, hands folded neatly behind its back. The shadow. My shadow. It walked toward my mother, slow, deliberate. She stumbled back, shaking her head, whispering something, but the film had no sound.
The shadow leaned close to her ear, and she screamed, that same scream I'd heard echoing through the house only moments ago. My heart pounded, each beat crawling up my throat. I stepped closer to the wall, closer to the flickering reenactment of the worst night of my life. Then the projector stuttered. The film paused. The figure on screen, the shadow, turned its head and looked straight at me. Its blurred face sharpened into my own, older, colder, wearing a smile that felt like a wound splitting open. Then it raised one hand and pointed not at the mother, not at the child, but at me, the man watching. A whisper drifted through the basement, though the projector made no sound. "You came back to finish what you started." The film burst into flames. The curtains behind me trembled, and footsteps, heavy, certain, descended the stairs that weren't there a moment ago. Someone, something, was coming down to meet me.
The footsteps descending toward me weren't hurried. They were patient, confident, like the one walking them already knew how this story would end. I stood frozen in the half-burnt glow of the projector's dying flame as the basement warped around me, walls bending inward, ceiling lowering, shadows twisting like they were waiting for a command. The first thing I saw was the hand. Not monstrous, not distorted, just a man's hand, my hand, resting on the railing of a staircase that hadn't existed seconds ago. Then the rest of him stepped into view. The shadow, wearing my face.
But this time there was no blur, no distortion, no impossible grin carved into the bone. He looked exactly like me. Same tired eyes, same hollow lines carved by sleepless years, same scar above the brow from the night everything in my life broke. He walked down the last few steps with measured ease and stopped only a few feet from me. We stood face to face, two versions of the same man, one who had tried to forget, and one who had remembered everything. "I've been following you for a long time," he said, my voice, but stripped of warmth, stripped of fear, stripped of anything human, waiting for you to be ready. "Ready for what?" I whispered. He tilted his head, the way the shadow always had. "To stop lying to yourself." He raised his hand, palm up, and with a soft scraping sound something slid across the floor toward me. A small metal object, cold, familiar. A revolver. My revolver. The one I carried the night my mother died. I staggered back. No, I didn't." "You did," he said quietly. "You just didn't stay to watch." The basement trembled. The walls flickered with images, the film replaying in fragments, scenes of that night looping in bursts of static, the phone falling, her scream, my younger self standing in a daze. And then a frame I had never seen. The gun in my childhood hand, pointed upward, my mother's terrified face, the shadow standing beside me like a tutor.
"No," I whispered, shaking. "I can't be real. I was only a child." My double stepped closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "You didn't kill her, but you could have saved her." The projector's last ember sputtered. She wasn't screaming at the shadow. She was screaming at what she saw in you, at what you were becoming. I staggered as the truth, partial, painful, incomplete, struck like a blow. My memories fractured, revealing glimpses of nights I woke sleepwalking, of voices in dark corners, of something standing beside me as far back as I could remember. "You brought me here," I said. "Why?" "To choose," he replied. "Either let the past consume you," he nodded towards the darkness behind him, where shapes moved, each wearing pieces of me, "or accept the shadow you've been running from. And if I accept it," his smile was faint, almost sad, "then we become whole, and this house, this prison of memory, finally lets us go." Behind him, the shadows leaned forward, hungry. Behind me, the floorboards groaned, opening into the dark maw that had dragged me down. I looked at the gun, at him, at all the versions of me waiting in the dark. The decision came like a breath I'd been holding for decades. I stepped forward, not towards the gun, not towards the shadows, but towards him. My hand brushed his, and the cold of his skin seeped through me like ink in water. For a heartbeat, we were two. Then,
We weren't. The basement let out a long, shuddering exhale. The walls twisted once, twice, before collapsing into fog. The burning projector guttered out. The house dissolved around us like ash in running water. And suddenly I was standing alone in Foggy Alley again, under the single flickering lamp. The night was silent, still, empty, but I felt him. Within me now. Not a shadow behind my back, not a whisper lurking in forgotten corners. A weight, a presence, a truth reclaimed. When I stepped out of the alley, dawn was beginning to bleed into the sky, thin streaks of pale light cutting through the mist. And though the city had not changed, something in me had. I no longer feared the shadow following me, because now it walked at my side, where it had always belonged.